Welcome in, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Once again, my name is Elizabeth Vaccaro. I'm the Development Manager for Solar Energy International, and I'm going to be our moderator for this afternoon. So a few key points before we get started today. All of our attendees will be muted with their screens off for the duration of our webinar. If you have a question, please submit it to the Q&A function, not the chat function, and specifically with who that question is aimed towards, whether towards Mary or towards Tracy. We'll be addressing all of our questions at the end. If you're experiencing any IT problems, please put those questions into the chat and I'll be addressing those as best I can. We're planning on running for about an hour for the presentations, so feel free to stick around as long as you like for the Q&A afterwards, or feel free to sign off once the presentations are complete. All right, and with that, let's begin. So this presentation is led by CPACE in partnership with SEI. Our presenters today are Mary Marshall, the Solar Forward Program Manager at SEI, and Tracy Phillips, the Director of Colorado CPACE. To give a little bit of an introduction, the Colorado Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, or CPACE for short, is a statewide program designed to help finance energy efficiency, renewable energy, water conservation projects, and efficiency-focused construction projects. CPACE financing enables owners of eligible commercial and industrial buildings to finance up to 100% of all of their eligible improvements for 25 years. CPACE financing has been used all across Colorado to finance almost $94 million in improvement and new construction projects. It's been used all across the country to finance almost $2 billion worth of projects as well. And if you'd like to know more, you can check out at copace.com. For an SEI introduction, at SEI, we envision a world empowered by renewable energy. We're dedicated to training the global solar energy workforce to achieve that mission. We're headquartered in Colorado, utilizing hands-on training labs serving North America, labs in Costa Rica serving Latin America, and labs in Oman serving the Middle East. We deliver hands-on, in-person, and online training all around the world with alumni from over 145 countries. You can check out more of our training or our scheduling at solarenergy.org. So with those introductions, I'd like to hand it over to Tracy Phillips, the Director of CPACE.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. And I want to make sure you guys can hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, good. There we go. And let me share my screen. All right. And everyone can see my screen okay?
Yep.
All right, great. So yeah, thank you all for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk to you about CPACE. I know that we have folks from all over the country, so I'll be talking a lot about the Colorado CPACE program, but a lot of what I'll be explaining is applicable to other CPACE programs across the country. And I'll give you a little guidance there too about how you can find out more if you're located or have projects outside of Colorado where you can find resources associated with that. But as Elizabeth was saying, the CPACE program, to give you all some background, the program was launched in 2016, and the idea behind it was to help finance energy efficiency, renewable energy, and water conservation improvement projects for existing buildings. And it can also help finance sustainable and efficient new construction projects. The program, it is a statewide program, but each county needs to opt in to the program in order for us to be able to finance projects in that county. So, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. The program and the projects are all financed through private capital. So there's no state money, there's no federal money, no grants, no bonds. The program is completely self-sustaining and utilizes private capital to finance all of the projects. The program sponsor is the Colorado Energy Office. So they sort of oversee the program at a high level, and there's a board, we call it the New Energy Improvement District, and there's 7 volunteers on that board, the NEID for short, that sort of oversee the program. They're appointed by the governor, and they represent different stakeholder groups like commercial real estate, the financial organizations, energy consulting, sustainability, the utilities. So that's sort of a quick overview of the program. So what is CPACE? So I started my career as an energy consultant, and I used to get very frustrated developing projects because I would get all these great ideas developed in my analysis, and then owners would typically say one of two things. They would either say, I don't have the money to do this project, or they might say, well, I don't know how long I'm going to own this building. So, you know, if it has a longer return on investment, then probably not a good fit for me. So CPACE was designed to really attack those specific challenges with building owners and offer a different way of financing these types of improvement projects. So there's really 3 key things that make CPACE financing different than traditional financing and other sources of financing. So the first is it's 100% financing, like Elizabeth was saying. CPACE can cover all of the hard costs, all of the soft costs, everything associated with your improvement projects. The second is it's long-term financing. So you can finance these projects up to 25 years. So think about a traditional loan where an owner might have to come 20% out of pocket and finance it over 5 years. Now you have CPACE where you can finance 100% of the costs over 20, 25 years, let's say. The other key component, the third component to CPACE that really makes it different is it's an assessment that's placed on the property, right? That's what the name stands for. PACE is property assessed clean energy. So that assessment placed on the property is incredibly powerful, and this is why. As an assessment on the property, it enables the owner to make their payments through their property taxes. So in other words, when they get their property tax bill once a year or twice a year, they'll have this new line item, this CPACE assessment on there. So they'll make their payment when they make their property taxes, they'll make their CPACE payment along with that. What that enables an owner to do is if they sell the building down the road, they have the ability to hand off future payments to the next owner. So in other words, they can do these improvement projects, they'll make their payments for as long as they're in the building, they're enjoying the energy savings and any other benefits, right? The tax credits or utility incentives or whatever. Then when they sell the building 5, 7, 10 years down the road, they hand off the payments from that point on to the next owner who is now enjoying those energy savings that were invested in. So having that ability to hand off the payments is really compelling to a lot of building owners. A lot of these projects are designed to be cash flow positive as well. So in other words, where the energy savings that you're expecting are going to outweigh the payments. So say my payments are, you know, $15,000 a year, my energy savings on my utility bill might be $20,000 a year. So I can make my payments, and then I have another $5,000 extra that I can put into my pocket. A lot of projects are designed that way, and many programs across the country, they require that. They require that the energy savings outweigh the payments over the life of the financing term. In Colorado, we do not have that requirement. So in other words, you can do improvement projects here in Colorado that result in a utility cost savings, but those savings may not outweigh the payments over the finance term, right? But a good example is a roof. You may install a new roof. The roof might have better insulation. You might have a cool roof. That'll provide energy savings for the building, right? You're reducing the loads in the building. But for the energy savings to pay for that roof, the cost of the roof is just very large compared to the energy savings you're going to get. So it might be 200 years before the energy savings pay for that new roof. In programs outside of Colorado, you might not be able to finance a project like that because they may require that the energy savings outweigh the payments. In Colorado, you can absolutely do those types of projects. So the model we have here really opens it up to all different types of projects that you can do. So what's eligible? Well, the C in CPACE stands for commercial, right? So it's any commercial, industrial, agricultural building is eligible for financing. So it's not a residential program, but any commercial, industrial, agricultural building is eligible. People always ask me about nonprofits. They don't pay property taxes, so can this work for them? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Nonprofits have assessments placed on them just like everybody else. So they will most likely already have a property tax ID number. Even if they don't, the county can set them up with one. That doesn't mean they're going to be paying property taxes ever, but they can have the assessment placed on them, so then CPACE mechanically can work for them just like everybody else. And in fact, nonprofits, we've done quite a few of these projects, and CPACE is a great fit for them. One thing many nonprofits share is they don't have the money to do these types of improvement projects. So CPACE can be a really compelling fit for them. Multifamily, if it's 5 or more units, it's considered commercial multifamily. So like an apartment complex would be another great candidate for CPACE financing. Then anything with a utility cost savings is eligible for financing. So it's a very broad eligibility requirement. If I can quantify a utility cost savings, then that improvement is eligible. So any energy efficiency improvement that you can think of, any renewable energy improvement that you can think of, any water conservation improvement, they're all eligible for financing. You can sort of see a representative list there on the right. EV charging stations are also eligible for financing. Those use energy, of course, but the program has said they're in the spirit of what the program's trying to accomplish. And so EV charging stations are eligible in Colorado. In other markets, that might be a little different, but we have finance projects. I'm going to show you one actually later that included EV charging stations. Okay. Not only are the improvements themselves eligible for financing, but anything related to the project or the improvements is also eligible for financing. So if you need to do, let's say, an engineering design work or architectural work or an energy audit or a feasibility study associated with a solar PV project, or let's say you need to do structural upgrades associated with a new solar PV system on the roof, the cost of that structural upgrade would be eligible for financing. Or if you had to do asbestos abatement associated with a boiler retrofit, those costs can be included, as well as things like commissioning, or if you're doing measurement and verification on the back end, or even maintenance contracts for up to 5 years. All of that can be rolled into the financing. It's truly meant to be 100% financing, no out of pocket to a building owner. So that's for existing buildings. The other component that CPACE can be applied to is new construction. And in Colorado, we were actually the first program to introduce new construction financing. And since we did, many programs across the country have followed and are offering this financing as well. The idea here is that CPACE can provide between 15 and 20% of the total construction costs as long as a building either meets or exceeds the 2015 Energy Code. So again, if you have new construction financing in a market outside of Colorado, that might be a little different, but it tends to be something similar to what we have here. So if a building meets the 2015 Energy Code, if they're building to it, even if the jurisdiction requires something less, like 2012 or 2009, if the developer says, I'm going to volunteer and at least build to the 2015 Energy Code, then the project's eligible for 15% financing. And if that project can demonstrate that they're at least 5% better than the 2015 Energy Code in terms of the energy performance of the design, then it qualifies for 20% financing. And this is why this is so powerful in the new construction market. So on the left, you can sort of see when a developer is putting together their capital stack for their new construction project, they'll usually get a construction loan, right? And that'll represent the bulk of their financing. Let's say it's like 60 to 75% of their financing. But then they need to come up with other sources of financing. It could be owner's equity, or it could be something like a mezzanine loan or whatever. that money tends to be higher risk money, higher interest rate money, right? So you can see it'll usually come with an interest rate, let's say between 9% and 20%. The idea here is that you can introduce C-PACE financing into the capital stack to replace like a mezzanine loan or some of the owner's equity, or maybe as a gap filler, but whatever. C-PACE tends to come in these days around 5 to 6% interest rate. So if you can replace 9 to 20% interest rate money with 5 to 6% interest rate money, that's game changing. This is enormous to developers. And the idea here is that I used to do sustainable design assistance as part of my career. Many of the great ideas I would come up with would get what they call value engineered out of the project, right? They'd look at the budget and they say, yeah, those are really neat concepts, really great design features, but we can't afford them. We can't include it. So with C-PACE, the idea is you can afford to include those kinds of unique design features. This was some data provided by Rocky Mountain Institute, who's right here in Boulder, where I am. And this report sort of it really summarized the potential for commercial buildings. So this paper was released earlier this year, and it essentially said that you can, with no or low cost improvements, you could most likely on average cut a building's energy use by around 15%. If you do capital improvements, that's where C-PACE really fits in. So replacement projects, improvement projects, you're looking at on average about a 35% reduction in energy use. But this is where it becomes compelling to a building owner, because that translates into a net operating income increase for building owners between 2.4 and 5.6%. So owners love NOIs going up, as do banks, mortgage holders. They love seeing net operating incomes going up. So this is some real specific benefits, not only in the energy cost savings, but also in the operating costs of a building. And not only that, this translates into a property value increase. So this report demonstrated that property values will increase between $5 and $11 a square foot on average as a result of these types of improvement projects. So as an example, for a $50,000 building, this can translate into the building's value going up $250,000 to $550,000 as a result of these projects. So again, this is incredibly compelling to building owners when they see these kinds of data. So getting specific to Colorado, as I mentioned, it's a statewide program, but each county needs to opt in. We need the county commissioners to pass a resolution to opt into the program. So part of my job is to go out and talk to these counties, educate them on what C-PACE is and the benefits, and try to engage them and get them to opt in to the program. You can see we're up to 32 counties that have opted into the program. This represents about 75% of the building stock in Colorado. So we have some good coverage now throughout the state. There are plenty of other counties obviously I'm still talking to and continuing my discussions to try to get them engaged. One thing I'll mention is the counties in Colorado actually get paid for any projects that get financed in their county. They get a 1% fee. That's 1% of the annual payment goes to the county. So the reason for that is the county needs to place the assessment for us, right? The C-PACE assessment, the special assessment, and then they're the collection agent, right? So when the owner makes their payment with their property taxes, they'll remit the C-PACE portion to the program. So it's not a lot of work. When I talk to treasurers in these counties, it's about 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes of work a year per project. So it's not a big ask, but we are asking them to do something they don't normally do. So that 1% fee is meant to cover their administrative efforts. So as an example, if an owner has a payment of $40,000 a year, the county is going to get $400 to cover their administrative efforts. So part of what I wanted to talk to you too was a big part of what we're trying to do here in Colorado is reach what's called the small and medium building market, right? This has been classically very difficult to reach and to help those small and medium buildings, as well as rural communities. So many of the PACE programs across the country a lot of the focus is on metropolitan areas, cities and big buildings and big dollar projects. And we've really been working to try to engage and crack into this small and medium building market in rural communities. There are some challenges with these communities and these types of projects for sure. So one is the lean to value, which means the financing that an owner can get for a project through CPACE, typically, this isn't a rule, but it's usually around 20 to 30% of the building's value. So if I have $1 million building, I'm looking at $200,000 to $300,000 in financing that I can get through CPACE. So the challenge with some of these rural communities and smaller buildings is the building might not be worth a lot, right? If I have a $200,000 building, there's really not a lot I can do. So there are definitely limitations and challenges in that market. Some of the other challenges are, underwriting these projects, getting a bank, some of these capital providers comfortable with financing these projects can be difficult, especially if it's in a very remote community. But I'll talk about how we're addressing that. The other challenge too is some of these projects can be smaller dollar volume. So CPACE is really designed for larger projects. When I say larger, we've done projects as small as $60,000, but that's about as small as we can go. And when I say that, it's because CPACE doesn't make a lot of sense when you get down much lower than that. So if you think about it, right, for a $50,000 project, to finance it over 20 years, it's like financing your car over 20 years, right? It's just not a good fit. The numbers really don't work out well. So not to say you can't do it, but it's just not a really great application of CPACE. But we have made tremendous inroads and progress with smaller and medium buildings and rural communities, and I'm really excited about that. To the county, for benefits to the county and for them to opt in when I talk to them, these are some of the things I point out, right? CPACE, first of all, doesn't impact the county government resources hardly at all. Like I said, it's about 15 or 30 minutes of work a year, so not a lot extra. And the program's all privately funded, so there's no county money or state money or anything like that. And the intent of the program is to improve the commercial and industrial building infrastructure, right? So that helps on a whole lot of levels. It helps attract building owners and developers and businesses and tenants and retain them, right, with this more efficient, more attractive building stock. And the important thing to remember too is CPACE is voluntary. It's just offering another way of financing these types of projects, right? It's not being forced on anyone, but in some cases it can be a very compelling way to finance these types of projects. Another thing I wanted to mention is because it's an assessment on the property, that it's a really unique and excellent mechanism, but it comes with one sort of caveat, I guess, and that is that because it's an assessment, it takes priority ahead of the mortgage, which means for any of these CPACE projects where there's a mortgage holder, and there usually is, that mortgage holder needs to provide consent. So they sign a document that says, yes, we are comfortable with the owner using CPACE financing on this building. So as part of the process, we're going to talk to the mortgage holder and explain to them about CPACE and the reasons there are benefits to the mortgage holder, right? If you look at the bottom half of my slide, some of these items I pointed out earlier, the result of these projects is going to be an improved net operating income. And banks love that. They love to hear that. That's the owner's ability to pay their mortgage, right? The result of this project is also going to be increased building value. And that's the bank's collateral, right, at the end of the day. So again, they like to hear that a lot. So these can be very compelling. The mortgage holders are risk analysts at the end of the day. So they want to know, well, all right, if there is a default, if things go poorly, well, what's the risk? And I won't go into too much detail here, but I'll just say CPACE doesn't accelerate, meaning it doesn't come due in a foreclosure scenario. It simply sits with the building and waits until somebody makes those past payments whole again. So in other words, the mortgage holder is not subordinating or sitting behind the entire CPACE financed amount. they're only potentially sitting behind 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years worth of delinquent payments, which on average is only about 0.5% of the building's value. So it's very low risk at the end of the day to these mortgage holders. And to that point, we've actually had 33 different mortgage holders provide consent here in Colorado, many of them multiple times now. And once a bank has been exposed to CPACE, then the conversation becomes much easier on future projects, right? Now they've heard about CPACE, they've been through the experience, they know the benefits, and they know the minimal risk. So this is incredibly valuable to have this much success across Colorado. Across the country, there's been over 200 different mortgage holders that have provided consent. So the industry in general has really been embracing CPACE, becoming comfortable with it. The same goes for the new construction side. Even though new construction financing is very new to the marketplace, we've had 20 different construction lenders provide consent to date. So again, this has really made it a much easier conversation when we have a ground up new construction project that construction lenders have embraced CPACE, they understand what it is and the value of it. I mentioned that it's all private capital that finances these projects. So in Colorado, we have what's called an open source funding model. And again, other programs across the country have followed what Colorado has done. In many programs, though, you still have the case where there's only 1 or 2 capital providers that finance all the projects in that market. But in Colorado, they said anyone can finance a project here. And the idea behind that was, well, quite frankly, to create competition among the capital providers, which would help reduce their interest rates, reduce their fees, just make it a better deal, basically, for building owners and developers. And here in Colorado, we've recruited 38 different capital providers, and they're a mix. There's PACE financing specialty firms. So these organizations, all they do is finance PACE projects across the country. But we also have a lot of local banks, community banks, credit unions. This is one of the ways we've been able to help service the small and medium buildings and the more rural community. So, for example, if I go to one of the big financial organizations located in St. Louis, and I say, I've got a project in Los Animas, Colorado, can you help me finance it? They're gonna say, I don't know where Los Animas is. No way, you know. But I can go to the bank, Fowler State Bank or Bank of Colorado or Alpine Bank, you know, a community bank that's right up the street that most likely knows the building owner, or maybe they're even the mortgage holder on the property, right? So they're going to be much more likely to be willing to finance that project and be able to underwrite a project like that. So this has been incredibly powerful in the Colorado market for a lot of different reasons. And I mentioned some of this earlier, but some of the key metrics with respect to the capital providers is for a building to be a good candidate for CPACE, you usually want to see a loan to value of 80% or less. So what does that mean? Well, it means you look at what's the value of the property and what's the mortgage on the property. And if that's 80% or less, then you're usually a good candidate for CPACE. And that's not a rule, but that's usually what a lender wants to see. So as an example, if I have a $1 million building and I have a $600,000 mortgage on that building, that's a 60% loan to value. So that would be a really good candidate for CPACE. If a building has no mortgage on it, by the way, that's a fantastic candidate for CPACE. So I hope you'll call me immediately after this if you have an owner with no mortgage that wants to do a project. And then I mentioned this earlier, but how much financing can a building owner get through CPACE? It's usually around 20 to 30% of the building's value. Again, that's not a rule, but that's typically what we'll see. So that $1 million building, you're looking at $200,000 to $300,000 in financing. As a developer or a contractor, project developer or contractor, I'm sure we have a lot of, let's say, solar contractors or other folks out there. The idea with CPACE is you're now able to offer a building owner a different way of financing their project. So you'll talk to the owner and you'll say, here's what I'm proposing, and this is how much it's going to cost. And the owner, and can you write me a check, right? That'd be the best for me. And the owner might say, no, I don't have the money to do that. And then you say, okay, how about a traditional loan? You can come 20% out of pocket, we'll finance it over 5 years. And the owner may still say, nah, that's really not a great fit for me, and I'm thinking I might sell the building in 7 years. I'm a little reluctant. That's when you could say, all right, now let me tell you about CPACE. And you can give them sort of those 3 bullets: 100% financing, long-term financing, and you can transfer future payments to the next owner. And if they seem intrigued, that's when you say, okay, let me get my friend Tracy on the phone, and he's going to help tell you more about the CPACE building. I want to mention a couple of tools that we have available here in Colorado, and these are also available throughout the country. So one of them, very specific to solar projects, is what we call our PaceWorks Solar Project Estimator. So this is a tool, you can go onto our website and access it, and essentially it's dynamically linked to PV watts. So if you enter in some information about the building and the system that you're thinking about, it'll generate the solar production using PV watts. But then more importantly, it can provide you with some financial analytics. So it'll show, give you sort of a quick idea of what would this project look like if you financed it through CPACE. And if you're interested in learning more about that, just ask me at some point and I'll help you out. The other really exciting tool that we released earlier this year, we call EPIC, the Energy Performance Improvement Calculator. And this is essentially very similar to what I just discussed, but for where that's only for solar PV projects, this is for basically everything else. So if you're looking at HVAC improvements or lighting improvements or domestic hot water or new controls or whatever, you can use the EPIC tool to analyze the energy cost savings associated with those improvements. And then again, even almost more powerfully, you can present the financial analytics of what this project might look like. One of the ideas behind this tool, EPIC, is for owner engagement. It can be hard to get an owner excited and interested about what you're trying to tell them, right? So with very minimal information about a building, you can never even visit the building yet, right? You just need to know basically what's the address, what type of building is it, what's the square footage, and then you can use this tool. It's based off of 10,000 projects that we've done in the past across the country over the last decade through all these different markets. And it uses all that information to help figure out defaults and what systems are going to cost and everything else. So you can give an owner in literally like 15 to 30 minutes, okay, if you do a few of these things, here's what your project might look like. And this tool is not specific just to CPACE either. It's fantastically powerful for CPACE, but you can use this for any type of project, regardless of how you finance it. So if you're looking for an owner to, they want to look at what does it look like if I self-fund it versus a traditional loan versus CPACE, you can use this tool to sort of give them an idea of what that's going to look like. So Mary, I'm seeing that I got about 12 more minutes. I'm going to take up 10, but cut me off if I go too long. And I just want to show you sort of as a summary what we've done in Colorado and show you some case studies. So to date, we financed 82 projects here in Colorado, about $94.6 million in financing. As I mentioned earlier, project sizes in Colorado have ranged from $60,000 being the smallest up to $7.1 million here in Colorado. And I'm going to show you both of those projects in a minute. If you're curious, the sky's the limit. There is no project that is too big for CPACE financing. There is tons of money that wants to invest in these types of projects. The biggest project to date in the country was a $54 million CPACE project in Utah, which closed earlier this year. So there's really no limit in terms of the size of the project. In Colorado, of those 82 projects, 20 of them were new construction. So again, I mentioned this is sort of a new type of way of using CPACE, but it's become incredibly powerful, and many developers are now using CPACE for new construction. In particular, hospitality. Of those 20 new construction projects, 9 of them have been hotels. So the hospitality industry has really embraced CPACE financing for new construction. So let me show you some case studies. This will give you a little idea of some of the types of projects that CPACE is being used for in Colorado. And this is fairly representative, I think, of other markets as well. So this was actually the very first project we financed in Colorado. And this was a 100 kilowatt solar PV system and a lighting retrofit, which was about $330,000. And so the owner actually looked at replacing the roof as well. They needed to, and they did. And they looked at including the roof replacement along with the solar and lighting, but it just made more sense for the owner financially to finance the roof out of pocket and use CPACE for the solar and the lighting. So that's what they did. So you can always mix and match, right? You can either finance everything, or even if everything's eligible, you can mix and match and maybe just finance components of it. So they did a project that was $330 grand. The other important thing I want to mention on this building, and this is most likely the same in other programs, one of the tenants in this building was a cannabis grow operation. Anything to do with cannabis is not eligible for financing through CPACE. So, it's you know, you can say whatever you want about it, but that's just the way it is. So on this project, if you're curious, we actually carved that tenant out of the project. So the solar was done, hooked up to the meters for 6 of the 7 tenants. The lighting was done for 6 of the 7 tenants. So there are ways you can sort of navigate that in some cases, but I did want to point that out. There's really no limit to the size of building either. So this was one of the first smaller buildings that we financed. This is a 4,000 square foot dry cleaners. This is actually my dry cleaners, so right up the street from me, about 10 minutes away. I didn't even know this was my dry cleaners actually until I went there to talk to the owners. And when I was heading out there, my wife mentioned, she gave me dry cleaning to bring with me. And I was like, oh, that's my dry cleaners, I guess. So, but they ended up doing a $125,000 solar PV project. Again, the building's not that big, so they did a little bit of it on the roof, but they had a lot of land that they weren't utilizing, so they did a ground mount system. And this is a great fit, especially for rural communities or smaller, you know, one thing they tend to have is a decent amount of land. So a ground mount system could be a nice fit for them. This was, I mentioned in Colorado, we don't have the requirement that the savings have to outweigh the payments. So this was one of our first negative cash flow project, meaning this owner, they had some needs that they had to get done. They had to replace their roof and they had to replace the rooftop unit that was serving the building. They were miserable, the roof was leaking, they couldn't keep it conditioned. So that's what brought them to the CPACE program. And what they did was what we see a lot of building owners do, which is they said, okay, what else is on our bucket list? What else have we always wanted to do? So they, you know, they had these sort of negative things that they had to get done, but you're replacing the roof. That's the perfect time to put solar on the building, right? So that's what they did. They financed 16 kilowatts of solar on the roof. They also said, well, we've always wanted to have electric vehicle charging stations. And so they included that too. You can see on the left, they financed as part of the project 3 EV charging stations. So it's a really neat example of an owner sort of taking a negative situation and bringing a real positive spin to the project. On the smaller side, at least in the CPACE world, this is one of the smaller projects that we've done. So that's Steve Ella. I think Mary even knows Steve. He's an organic farmer out in Paonia. And Steve did a $60,000 solar PV project. And you can see how happy he is about it. I actually stole your picture, Mary, from SEI that you took a much better picture of Steve than I did. So, but so Steve really proved that we could finance quote unquote smaller projects and rural communities we could serve. So this was really exciting when we got this one done. And we've done a lot of other projects like Steve since then. On the larger size, this is the biggest one we've done in Colorado so far. This was the $7.1 million project. This is in Fiddler's Green, and it's 2 sister office buildings. And again, the owner needed to replace their very large rooftop units to serve these buildings. So that was their main reason for coming to the program. But they ended up doing a lot of other things. They hadn't replaced all the lighting, so they finished that up and did lighting retrofit. They also included, they replaced all the plumbing fixtures with water efficient fixtures. They did a smart irrigation system, which is really neat. They included a very sophisticated advanced metering system called fault detection and diagnostics, or FDD. They even included, they got LEED certification, LEED for existing buildings, and they included the cost of that LEED certification effort in with the financing. So that was considered related as well. Just a couple more I want to show you on the new construction side. This was one of the early new construction projects we did. And again, sort of as an example of a rural community, this is the Mayfly headquarters building. So David and Doug Dragoo, they own Mayfly, and they basically make and sell fly fishing equipment. So they wanted a new manufacturing facility and headquarters building in Montrose. And so they used $1 million in C-PACE financing to help get their building built. And it allowed them to include all these efficient HVAC systems and heat recovery and all these different daylighting strategies and really neat design concepts. I mentioned too, hospitality, hotels are a big part of what the program's financing. So this is one that closed not too long ago up in Summit County in Silverthorne. It's going to be called The Pad, and it's a real kind of a boutique hotel up there. And they used $2.8 million to help finance their project. Gut rehabs are also another big part of what C-PACE is being used for. So this was a big box retail that had been vacant for quite a while. And they used $1.7 million in C-PACE to replace the windows, replace the skylights. They put in new HVAC equipment, destratification fans, lighting, all sorts of stuff. But they totally revitalized this and made it, it's one of the most impressive gyms I've ever seen in my life. They have all sorts of neat stuff going on here. But a lot of these projects, that's what they're doing, is using C-PACE for these sort of completely to revamp buildings. And I mentioned nonprofits. So as an example of a few nonprofits we've done in Colorado, this was the Forney Museum in Denver. They've got all sorts of old cars and motorcycles and trains. It's a really neat museum. And this was, again, a sort of a smaller project. They used about $62,000 in C-PACE to help do a lighting retrofit. Another example of nonprofit, this is a senior center, and they used just under $2 million to completely overhaul their chiller plant and the HVAC equipment and the exhaust and the lighting. So again, for nonprofits, this can be a really, really great fit. So to wrap up, C-PACE can be very compelling for building owners. The whole 100% financing, long-term financing, I can transfer payments to the next owner. This is very unique source of financing and can really be the best option or the only option for a lot of building owners. So if you're a contractor and you're interested in getting registered with the program, you can reach out to me, but this is the first step really, is to submit a contractor registration form. Once we get this, we'll get you registered. The other part of it is we'll ask that you attend one of my workshops. So what I just told you in about 40 minutes, I'm going to give you the 2-hour version. And so you'll attend that and you'll really become or have a great understanding of C-PACE. If you're an owner or you're working with an owner or a developer that's interested in C-PACE, the first step is to submit what we call a pre-qualification submission form. So you'd send this in and this will get the process started. Once we get this, we'll pre-screen the building, we'll set up a kickoff call so we can get things going, and then we'll get to work with getting your project financed. So there's my information, Tracy Phillips. Ken Gallagher is my colleague. We sort of both work together and run point for the program. In the bottom right there, Elizabeth mentioned this earlier, but that's our website here in Colorado, copace.com. A last thing I'll mention too, because I know we have folks across the country, if you're looking for programs like the one I just described outside of Colorado, if you go to pacenation.org, pacenation.org, it's a terrific repository of information about PACE, and it's got a listing of every single PACE program across the country, so that can help get you started. All right, I've talked way more than I should have, right, Mary? But I'm gonna hand it over to you.
No worries at all. My presentation isn't very long, but thank you so much for all of that super helpful information. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen now. Okay. Great. Well, thank you everybody so much for being here. Again, we will be taking questions at the end of my presentation. So just hang tight for a few more minutes here and we'll be taking questions from both Tracy's presentation and my presentation as well. And if you could put those into the Q&A section on the bottom of the screen instead of the chat, that would be really helpful. So my name is Mary Marshall, and I am the program manager at Solar Energy International for the Solar Forward program. And today I'll be talking to you all a little bit about this program. What is the Solar Forward program, how it can help rural communities, and what tools does this program have to offer rural communities? Solar Forward is SEI's technical consulting program for rural communities to kickstart solar markets. The Solar Forward program envisions a world where barriers to clean energy adoption are addressed by local grassroots and economic policy solutions. While each community solutions are unique, together they are a collective force in addressing the climate crisis. So we really believe that rural communities can benefit the most from a renewable energy or solar energy market, and oftentimes the resources that these communities need to kickstart and support these markets are less available than they are in urban areas. This program aims to focus on those barriers and to really help the places that could benefit from this market the most grow those markets in a sustainable way. To date, this program has been responsible for 1.7 megawatts of new installed solar across the state of Colorado, over 260 total new solar PV systems, nearly 24 new jobs across 5 different counties that we've worked in, and of course, hundreds educated on the benefits of solar energy and energy efficiency. This program started off in Delta County. So Delta County is in Western Colorado, and it's a rural community where SEI is headquartered. In 2015, in Delta County, 2 of 3 major coal mines shut down or greatly reduced their operations, and the community suffered from hundreds of lost jobs. And this dealt a, really destabilizing blow to the local tax base, and it really just rocked the local economy. So SEI sought out a way to help with some local economic revitalization in a way that aligned with our nonprofit mission of a world powered by renewable energy. And we started what was then called our economic revitalization through solar efforts. And this is now called Solar Forward because that was not the catchiest name. But that started off kind of a 2-pronged approach where we were focused on kickstarting the solar market and also introducing and leveraging some of SEI's technical training to support the local workforce in Delta County by creating a vocational trade training program for high school students. So the side related to kickstarting the solar market, we actually implemented Solarize programs, which are bulk purchase solar programs that incorporate partnering with a local installation company and incentivizing community members to go solar through a window where there is a discount on solar panels and there is an outreach campaign implemented in the community. This program was so successful that we did 3 rounds of it. And our 3rd round was focused on agricultural producers. And we worked with our county commissioners to get CPACE passed in Delta County. And like Tracy mentioned earlier, in Hotchkiss was one of the first agricultural CPACE projects. So that is agriculture is a really great application for CPACE. It is such an energy intensive industry. So coupled with SEI's workforce development focus, we set out to systemize and scale this program throughout the state of Colorado to specifically focus on the needs of rural communities. So Solar Forward leverages SEI's technical expertise to help communities meet local sustainability goals, achieve economic development benefits of a solar market, and create jobs. This program consists of free technical consulting. So our partners receive the help of a SEI technical advisor who can help you with solar growth initiatives. You also gain access to a Solar Forward toolkit, which is compiled by industry experts, and it makes it easy to launch solar outreach initiatives in your community. Finally, this program also features SEI workforce development training, and it also incorporates SEI professional services for third-party consultation and solar development assistance. So this is just a bit more about how the program works. A nonprofit or a community group of volunteers, or even a government sustainability department with the interest and capacity to implement a bulk purchase solar program or a solar educational outreach campaign in their community applies to participate in the Solar Forward program. SEI's technical advisor, armed with a toolkit for community solar initiatives and technical experience in implementing these campaigns, then partners with and empowers this community group to implement a solarized bulk purchase program and educational outreach campaign in their own community. That community group, nonprofit, or group of volunteers then becomes the program coordinators on the ground in that community. They're able to customize the tools in this toolkit and implement a program. And ultimately, this partnered community or region will benefit as a whole from the positive aspects of introducing a solar market to the region. So I've been talking about the Solar Forward toolkit, and I'm going to get a little bit more in detail about what that consists of. The Solar Forward toolkit has folders. It's a virtual toolkit that has everything you would need to launch an educational outreach initiative on solar energy for your community. This includes technical documents like a request for a proposal to select a partnered solar installer for your program. It includes customizable marketing materials such as banners, flyers, postcards, outreach materials like presentations about solar energy, financing materials like an RFP to work with local banks to help create talking points or negotiate for loans that would be applicable to solar energy systems to use and promote in this program. Website materials to set up a solar landing page, and an IT consultant to help you set up that web page as well as media resources. And as I mentioned before, you also get paired with a technical consultant who will help you utilize this toolkit and help you with your program every step of the way. So this is just some visual examples of some of the things that are in the toolkit. As I mentioned before, this really leverages SEI's technical training expertise. So there are video tools that have been made by SEI's curriculum developers that will guide you through the basics of solar and through steps in the process, like choosing a solar installer to be your partner in this program. We have partnered with groups across the state that aren't necessarily involved in the solar industry. We've worked with community volunteers who just want to see more solar in their community, and we've worked with economic development nonprofits. So this toolkit is really tailored to meet everybody where they're at when it comes to what your solar knowledge is. Speaking of your solar knowledge as well, our partnered group or the program coordinators on the ground get access to free SEI training in the form of our PV 101 class, which is our all-encompassing introduction to the solar industry class. And this is just another visual example of some of our customizable marketing materials. I mentioned this before as well too, but As a part of this program, SEI scholarships are awarded to local community member trainees in the hopes of more folks in your community joining the solar workforce. So if there are local contractors who want to get into solar, or local folks who might want to eventually be employed by a solar installation company or start their own solar company, we have scholarships available for community members. We also have SEI's for-profit spinoff, SEI Professional Services, available to offer quality support for local installers. A lot of times we're working in rural communities that have maybe just one solar installer, or they might not have a solar installation company, and there's concern about, really creating interest in solar without the existing market infrastructure to sustain that growth. SEI Professional Services is available in this program to help, these beckoning solar businesses to provide some assistance in, quality assurance support, inspections, just to assure that the market is growing in a safe and a sustainable way. So I touched on this before as well, but solar markets have a lot of benefits specifically to rural communities, especially when you're talking about a situation like Delta County, where, this was a transitioning coal mining community. The introduction of solar energy there not only created jobs, but when you're creating your own local energy, that's millions of dollars that's not going outside of the community to pay off utility bills. That's money staying in the community that needs it the most. Additionally, in addition to creating local jobs, we have seen before that, especially with commercial instances, businesses that go solar are saving money on their utility bill. They're able to increase their capacity and hire on more folks to their business. So it just has broad benefits across the community. The Solar Forward program specifically has seen that a lot of our community partners have used this program as a way to just really garner attention to the conversation of solar energy and initiate important policy conversations. For example, our partners in Gunnison County, after they implemented their Solarize program, they had so much community support for solar, they were able to negotiate with their local utility to adopt a better net metering policy to make going solar way more financially viable for local residents. And of course, solar energy and renewable energy is a huge complement to agriculture, as it is a very energy intensive industry, and it's often a major economic contributor in some of these rural communities. So I have a quick clip here from one of our solar installation company partners in Delta County, Brad Burritt, who went through this program with SEI.
We did Solarize programs in Delta County 3 years running, 2015 through 2018, of which you were involved with.
Yes.
And since Solarize began, we have grown about 4 times in gross sales. And I would say we've grown more than that in employment, full-time equivalents, because I was working too much, especially at the beginning of Solarize, but that's evened out somewhat. So yeah, we're in a pretty good space right now. We did.
So the impact that this program has on rural communities spans, beyond the amount of solar systems installed. It really introduces solar as a part of a conversation. And as Brad said, it creates sustainable growth. So even after this initiative, there's enough business and interest within a community that these solar companies can hire on more capacity and scale up to accommodate for future growth of the industry.
they were able to generate enough leads that we were able to sustain the growth that we started that first year. And, we knew that when Solarize was over that we'd be on our own. So we ramped up our promotion and advertising and, increased our budget a few times to compensate for the, for the loss of the Solarize campaigns. And, that was very successful. We were able to keep running and keep the jobs coming. And the long-term benefit of Solarize was that solar largely became known and way more mainstream in Delta County because of the Solarize campaigns. So it was great for the county and it was great for our company.
And finally, just another a new component of this program that is a benefit for rural communities is we've recently launched a partnership with the Colorado Energy Office and specifically their agriculture energy efficiency program. We've been teaming up to offer a series of educational webinars, and we also have more collaboration planned for the future. So I would absolutely love to answer any questions that you have about the Solar Forward program. This is my contact information. This webinar is going to be recorded, sent out to the attendees, and posted on our webpage here at solarenergy.org/solarforward. And now we can take questions from anybody who might have anything for me or Tracy.
Thank you so much, Mary and Tracy. Those were incredible presentations. And thank you so much for all of the questions that came in. So the first question that we'd like to answer to Tracy, question is, does this process transfer risk from owner or bank to other taxpayers?
No is the answer, right? The financing is specific to that building, and there's no, I mentioned earlier, there's no public funds involved with the program or financing these projects in any way. So the project is very specific just to that building. So it wouldn't, the only way it could impact other folks in the community would be in a positive way, right? Now you have a building that's more efficient, that's more attractive, has solar on top of it. So there really be no other impact on the taxpayers or anybody else.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question is for Tracy. I'm curious to hear more about the way CPACE fuses public structures, such as property tax, municipal approval, with private capital. How does that work? And are there tensions between public good and investor profits?
Yeah, so CPACE is designed as a public-private partnership, right? It's another example of where the government and private industry are working together to improve the sustainable built environment, right? So I'd say just the opposite. It doesn't really create tensions. And in fact, it helps a great partnership. A lot of these communities might have efficiency goals that they're trying to reach. You'll see all sorts of sustainability plans now for municipalities or counties, or the state might have something. And really the question is, how are you going to get there? It's great to say we're going to reduce emissions by 30%. So what's next? What's the plan? How do you get there? So CPACE is a tool that you can use as part of the piece of the puzzle to bring it all together. And you can really fuse anything else along with CPACE. It's just another way of financing your project. So it doesn't inhibit you. We have plenty of projects like the one we showed earlier with Steve Ella. He received a REAP grant to help also finance his project. Or you could get either grants from the USDA, or so all of that can come to bear and help work. And CPACE is part of the solution.
Wonderful, thank you. I see several questions on where can I get the recording of this webinar? Can we get a copy of this presentation? To reiterate what Mary said, we'll be putting this presentation recorded on our website, and all participants will receive an email with the information. Another question for Tracy is, who are the private capital players?
Yeah, and I answered that one in the chat. And so there's on our website, we have a list of all 38 capital providers. So you can just go to the website, look under the capital provider directory, and you can see a list of all of them there.
Thank you. And for Mary, does FCI have any programs or impact in Africa? And if so, which countries?
SEI does have a program centered on the Middle East and Africa. And I can go ahead and put the link to those programs from SEI in the chat.
Great, thank you. All right, any more questions? I see one in the chat that says, thank you for your amazing presentations. Question for Tracy. When you prepare your projects, do they include classic ratios like IRP, NPV, BE/costs, and ROI? What's the lifespan and recovery?
Yeah, so part of the responsibility of the program is to help all the folks involved with the project understand the financial analytics of that project and the projection. So when we receive all of the analysis and the scopes of work, the program does first a quality assurance review. So we're going to check everything and make sure all the numbers are reasonable, the engineering methodology is sound, everything else. And then we'll develop a financial report for the owner, for the mortgage holder, for the capital provider that they're going to review. And all of the acronyms you just used, the net present value and everything else, they're all displayed there. So everybody can review the financials of the proposed project. The other thing, and I sort of saw a question on this too, is all of these parties need to agree that this is a good project from their perspective. So you have the owner that's going to look at it and say, okay, this is what I'm going to use in CPACE financing. This is what my payments are going to look like, and here's the cash flow projections, and they're going to evaluate it from their perspective. And then you have the bank, the mortgage holder, and they're going to say, okay, I'm allowing this CPACE financing to be used to fund this project. Is this a good investment from our point of view? What's the risk to us? What are the benefits to us? And then you have the capital provider lending the money, right? So they're going to do the same thing. They're going to go through their underwriting, and they're going to determine if it's a good fit for them. So you need all three of these parties coming together with the program providing a level of assurance and overview on all of it before a project's going to go forward. So I'll mention this too, there's been 2,500 projects financed across the country. There's only been 2 of those projects that have gone into default, meaning the owner wasn't able to make their payments for whatever reason, right? That's a less than 0.1% default rate. So it's been pretty secure and pretty successful over the last 10 years.
Thank you. A follow-up question is, does CPACE provide financial services in Canada, particularly British Columbia?
Yeah, not yet. And I actually have talked to, and I know some of my colleagues as well, have talked to folks in Canada that are interested in looking at getting PACE programs started. So my mom's from Canada too, so I'd love to see it come there for a lot of reasons. But yeah, so it is in the works. I don't know exactly, I've given them advice, I've explained to them how we've done it and some of the lessons learned and everything else. So it's in progress. I don't know where they're at, but hopefully it'll come to Canada soon.
Thank you. And it sounds like Colorado has very strong support for CPACE. Can you say more about how it compares to other states and how the support was in other states?
Yeah, Colorado is definitely the best program in the country. No, I'm just kidding. And I know Dub Taylor, so Dub is the director of the Texas PACE program, so I know he's on. Yeah, so Colorado definitely has embraced CPACE for the most part, which has been fantastic. Many other states have been tremendously successful with CPACE. It does continue to grow. There are 27 states that have active PACE programs currently. And last I looked, there's about 57 CPACE programs across the country. So it's continuing to evolve. It's continuing to get accepted by the marketplace. I would even say, in particular with COVID-19, we haven't really mentioned the elephant in the room, right? Or the gorilla, I forget what it is in the room. But CPACE can really be a very attractive way to help these building owners that are financially stressed, right? They're dealing with all these uncertainties. And here they have these buildings that still need attention, right? They still need to heat and cool these buildings, and they want to improve them or get things fixed. So CPACE, no out-of-pocket, finance it long-term, can be a really nice solution for a lot of these building owners that are really having a hard time. Throw in solar too, right? You get an immediate investment tax credit and depreciation, these other great cash flow benefits year one, right? That could really infuse money into a business as a result, and then finance it long-term. So there's some real tremendous solutions. But yeah, looking across the country, it's continuing to grow. If you go to that pacenation.org website that I mentioned, they have a list of all the programs. They also show state by state, like how much activity, how much financing is being done. California, obviously, as you would expect, is the biggest. They're the fifth biggest economy in the world, right? Just that state. So they're the biggest. But places like Ohio and Minnesota and Michigan and Texas and Colorado, these have been really active CPACE markets, but it's continuing to sort of expand across the country.
I would love to add on to that too, just going off of COVID, because I know I didn't mention that in my presentation. We've seen huge interest in this program in light of COVID. I would say, honestly, more so than ever before. There's just this heightened interest and concern about local resiliency in light of disasters that are totally outside of our control. And COVID has really kind of heightened this concern, especially for an impending climate crisis. So I have seen a lot of interest in communities asking how they can be more resilient through renewable energy. And especially some of the rural communities that I work with are extremely interested in battery technology and having off-grid systems. And we sort of piloted this virtual outreach campaign with a focus on off-grid systems in a rural community in Saguache County this year. That was really successful.
And then, sorry, Elizabeth, one more thing I want to add too, because I realized I didn't quite complete the answer. They were asking, how did it get to the support that it did, the CPACE program in Colorado? And so one thing I'll mention there is some of the critical paths to getting the word out and getting support for the program. The number one are contractors. So making sure contractors are educated and understand it's available. They're really on the front lines. So solar contractors, lighting contractors, mechanical contractors, roofers, having them armed with this information and understanding it's an option that they can offer to a building owner. That's an important piece. Having local governments engaged as well is a very important component to it. So I work a lot with economic developers and sustainability coordinators in municipalities or counties, and they're tremendous at getting the word out and working with us. And then, of course, there are organizations. Like, I really value our relationship with SEI, right? There are so many rural communities that have heard of CPACE, and it's mainly because they heard those words come out of Mary's mouth. So those kinds of, relationships between different organizations and the program can really be valuable.
Thank you. And another question is, how much support is there in Kansas?
Oh boy, I don't know anything about the Kansas program, so I can't help you there. But again, if you go to the program's website, you can take a look. Yeah, I just don't know much about Kansas. Sorry. I know Superman's from there. That's pretty great. But other than that, my info's done.
And it looks like our last question is, could you get a second loan for a project like PV for an elderly center?
Yeah, absolutely. You can not only, like I said, CPACE is part of the puzzle, right? So you can infuse any other sources of financing, wherever they come from, that's just fine. And not only that, you can use CPACE multiple times on a building. So you can maybe use CPACE to do one project, then a few years later, you can use CPACE again for a second project or a third project or whatever. And we've had building owners do that. So yeah, there's no limits there.
Great, thank you so much. That looks like the conclusion of all of our questions. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to myself, Tracy, or Mary. Thank you so much for joining us all today.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.